respond on occasion in behaving unduly. And on the clean up your patch, got one in particular dispenses with taxes. It plain to your face as advice unimpeachable. Ill chastised, any animals teachable. Any foes reachable. Let us embark. We declare, we declaim, we decry, we remark. The ethics and etiquette and get to jump sharp. Nine eyes strapped home and yet to set smart. With that in mind, employ each as it lingers. Keep the phrase in ready reach of your fingers. Lest you forget for a moment the edict trapped of eight frozen. Pull out that read it. Your friend consistently counsels the same. Urging all conditions struck from the king. Your friendly will. Internal system, listen or what? Moves to think it's involuntary, get disabused. It's you get who and get known at your discretion. Your boundaries untamed, practice repression.
I can't believe this is here. Hi, PAX. My name is Wil Wheaton. And as the duly elected Secretary of Geek Affairs, with the power vested in me by the many readers of Penny Arcade, it is my honor, it is my privilege, and it is my pleasure to say welcome home. When I addressed PAX Prime in 2007, I used some of the time I was given to dispute the ridiculous and now thoroughly discredited notion that we gamers are all antisocial psychopaths. I said that whenever I heard a pandering politician pontificate about how dangerous and antisocial and devoid of redeeming qualities video games and we who play them were, I got a little stabby. I was really sick of feeling like I had to defend us and our hobbies and present a case for the defense to people who had a vested interest in ignoring it. Well, since then, about 168,000 of us have been to PAX in Seattle, and millions of us have gone to gaming conventions all over the world. Our culture has grown so enormously that an annual gathering in just one city is not big enough to hold us. And while I thought that it might have been clever and amusing to open this speech with "I'm Wil Wheaton and Jack Thompson can suck my balls wicked hard," I decided not to. Because while it's a moderately funny thing to say, the truth is, nobody gives a shit about Jack Thompson anymore. Jack Thompson has been disbarred. He's as relevant as Jack Chick. Kids, ask your parents. He and people like him were wrong about us. They were wrong about everything. They lost every fight they picked with us in the court of law and public opinion, largely because we refused to be the caricature they claimed we were. So now, on those increasingly rare occasions when I encounter some poor, misguided fool who waves a sign and screams in my face that we're terrible, antisocial people, I don't feel stabby anymore. Instead, I simply say, we disagree. All 50,000 of us who came to Boston in March in the snow to play games together So, welcome home. If this is your first PAX, you may not realize it yet, but by the end of the weekend, you will know exactly what I mean when I say that, and you will join our now semi-annual tradition of counting down until the next PAX. And incidentally, I'm incredibly jealous of you PAX virgins. Not because some girl dressed up as magenta is going to come out and tickle you. But the time between your first PAX and your second PAX is only 5 months. It's not the usual 12. You do not know how lucky you are. It is for those of you who are new to PAX that I am going to steal from the 2007 version of myself and throw out some gaming references so that we can all see what generations are represented in this room. Feel free to holler out if any items on this list have caught your attention. It is very dark. You have died of dysentery. Roll initiative. Shots do not hurt other players. Yes. Enchantment? Enchantment! I play Dark Ritual and Black Lotus and summon a Sengir vampire. And not an M10 either. Our princess is in another castle. Ansien Meatal Elohim. Game over, Moon Pie. That's funny, in all my rehearsals, I never anticipated that would be the response. So my point then and now is that we may be from different generations. From the damn kids today who have never set foot inside an arcade to old guys like me who grew up in them. From a generation of gamers who never had to calculate THACO. To a generation who wrote entire systems so our children wouldn't have to. From those of you who don't even know what a mock set is, to those of us who sold ours to buy our first house. Whoever we are all here, all of us, because we are gamers. And for the next 72 hours, this is our time. When Robert Koo asked me if I would speak to you today and deliver the inaugural keynote address to PAX East, I think the first thing I said was something like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" No. There is no way I will ever be able to top 2007, and I don't know if I'm even going to be able to equal it. I obviously changed my mind. I kept thinking about how much I love PAX, and how much joy PAX has brought into my life. I kept thinking about how grateful I am to Gabe, Tycho, Enforcers, everyone I have met and gamed with at PAX since I first attended 3 years ago. I can divide my life in every way that matters into before PAX and after PAX. It would have been a flagrant violation of Wheaton's law, quite possibly my greatest contribution to the world, which would not exist without PAX, if I had said no. So I said yes. But what would I say when I got here? What was I going to talk about? The answer, unsurprisingly, came to me while playing a game. My friend Shane and I were playing Small World while we waited for the rest of our friends to get to my house so we could get down to the very serious business of losing Pandemic over and over again. I was destroying his berserk elves with my Dragon Master Amazons. And between turns, we sort of imagined what kind of world this was. where Amazons controlled dragons and elves were berserk fighters. Was this really a world worth fighting over? Maybe if they'd been commando Amazons, am I right? While he put the elves into decline in favor of bivouacking rat men, you know, like you do, I knew what my speech today would be about. Gaming is the foundation of the best friendships I have ever had. And it is the mortar that has held my group of friends together. It is the mortar that has held my group of friends together for over 25 years. So we are all here today because we love playing games. Some of the happiest days of our lives would not exist without games and gaming. Games are important. Games matter. PAX is where we come to celebrate that. So today, I'm going to celebrate games and talk about the power they have to inspire us to do great things while they entertain us. I am one of the luckiest people in the world because I get to tell stories for a living. Whether I'm writing my own stories or acting out the stories someone else has written, I use my imagination to bring those words to life. Now, I know that this sounds as insightful as saying when I ride a bike, I use the pedals to make it go. But I don't know if I'd be able to harness my imagination as an actor and a writer if I hadn't grown up playing games. Gaming is the lens that focused my imagination into a tool that I could use. You know all those times on Star Trek that we looked scared out of our minds because a terrifying spaceship has its weapons all loaded up and was about to destroy us? So Captain Picard called everybody into the observation lounge to discuss it at length for 10 minutes. Not that time, the other time. The audience got to see whatever the visual effects crew ultimately created. But when we were on the set, doing our part as actors to bring the story to life, we saw a piece of red tape in an X, if we were lucky, on the end of a C-stand with nothing scarier next to it than a group of studio executives eating our donuts from the craft service table. I don't know how much of a challenge it was for the other cast members to imagine something more threatening than Rick Berman wiping chocolate icing off his face. By the way, I took that bullet so you don't have to. But it wasn't difficult for me at all. I've been using my imagination to create aliens and spaceships, adventures and dungeons, even entire worlds. Since I sat on the floor of my Aunt Val's house in 1983 on a Christmas morning, looking at a red box with a big dragon on the front. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It claimed to contain a game inside of it. But when I opened it up, all I saw were a few books and some really weird dice with numbers on them instead of dots, and a crayon to color them in. My aunt told me that she'd heard it was a game that lots of kids liked to play. She said it has dragons and wizards and those things that you loved from The Hobbit. The back says that you use your imagination, and I know what a great imagination you have. My younger brother played with Legos, and our cousins played with handheld electronic games. So I looked at this box of books that didn't feel anything like a game, and I felt a little ripped off. Wow, I said, trying to mask my disappointment. Thanks, Aunt Val. Later, while the other cousins played Simon and Mattel electronic football, I sat near the fireplace and I flipped through one of those books. It said that I could be a wizard or a fighter, And there were pictures of them, but there weren't any pieces that looked like that. There were, however, a lot of charts with more numbers than my math book. My Aunt Val walked back into the living room and asked me what I thought. I colored in the dice. I haven't really read the book yet. She patted my leg and smiled at me warmly. Well, I really hope you like it. She moved to the other side of the room where my cousin Jack was having a whole lot of fun playing Mario Cement Factory on a Nintendo Game & Watch. Remember those? I was unsure which book to start with, but one of them said, "Read me first." I was very good at following directions. So I did. The very first thing I saw inside the cover was an 11-word declaration. This is a game that is fun. It helps you imagine. I didn't know it at the time, but my life had changed. I was a weird kid. I wasn't strong. I wasn't athletic. I was shy. I was awkward. I liked to read. So after going through just a few pages and realizing that I held in my hands a game disguised as a book that was not only fun, but helped me imagine, it was like I had found a new best friend. It took me a few months to find anyone to play with, and it wasn't until high school that I found an actual gaming group, including those guys that I lose pandemic with every week. But a few weeks later, in January of 1984, I had filled up an entire Trapper Keeper with a group of people I had summoned using nothing more than 3d6 and my imagination. And just like the book promised, it was fun. That folder could have passed as homework to the casual observer. And indeed, that was part of the plan to fool our teachers. But to me, it held much more than words and numbers on notebook paper. It held a thief, a couple of wizards, some fighters, an elf, because that was a class back then, and a cleric who didn't seem very tough, but was important for keeping everyone else alive, if I understood the rules correctly. Every one of my fighters had long bows and long swords. They all had plate mail and shields. The wizards cast magic missile once a day, as far from the action as possible on account of their awesome 1d4 hit points. The thieves all disarmed traps, scaled walls, and lugged around 10-foot poles. And the clerics all cured our light wounds and smote the fell creatures for the greater glory of some being who wasn't ever clearly named. That was how we rolled back then. 27 years later, I can't recall their names. I don't remember exactly how they died. Low-level character death was as certain in those days as using a healing surge is today. But I can clearly recall how much fun I had creating them with nothing more than my imagination, a pencil, and my dice. My dice. I loved my dice. My dice were as fundamental to the titular, they were as fundamental to Dungeons & Dragons as the titular Dungeons & Dragons were. So of course, I cared about them. A lot. So much so, in fact, that I completely lost my shit at my son when he innocently picked them up a few years ago. Once again, I would like to say, I'm sorry, Ryan. Daddy's weird. With 3 decades of hindsight, I realized that I cared so deeply for those 6 pieces of plastic because they were just like me. They were a little weird. They were a little strange. They were a little difficult to understand. But if you made the effort and you reached out to them, you would have discovered that they could do some cool things. Especially if you held them cupped in the palm of your hand and touched them just right, ladies. television show called Leverage in Portland, Oregon last year. While I was there, I went to a huge, awesome indie bookstore called Powell's with my friend John Rogers. In addition to creating Leverage, John co-wrote the 4th edition manual of the Planes. He wrote the first draft of Transformers, the good one. And he is yet another high-profile member of what he and I affectionately call the Geek Tribe. We went to Powell's specifically to look through their D&D books. And as we did, I had a mild epiphany. I just realized why these books and these games are so important to me, I said. During a childhood that was completely abnormal, filled with things that I didn't choose for myself, these games were something I did choose to read and to play. These games were part of my new. John looked at me and he said, "Oh, so you were like every other kid who played D&D." It's funny now because it's true. But in the early 80s, I didn't have the internet or PAX to let me know that it wasn't weird or stupid that I carried character sheets with me everywhere I went. You know, just in case I needed them. Or that I imagined that the aisles in the grocery store were actually dungeon corridors, filled with traps and deadly pools of hot lava that required careful navigation using only certain floor tiles. Actually, now that I think about it, it's pretty remarkable that my mom got any shopping done on account of the hot lava that was everywhere. And who builds a grocery store on top of a volcano? Same guy who put the river of molten lava down the middle of our street. Just in case it was anonymous, my Aunt Val was right. I loved D&D. That red box with the Keep on the Borderlands inside was the trailhead of the path that led me right here today. It rewarded me and countless other shy, awkward kids like me for daring to imagine. It gave an entire generation of gamers access to countless fantastic worlds that were so amazing we never wanted to leave. And some really lucky guys like Chris Pramis, Monty Cook, Andy Collins, James Wyatt, they never had to. When the Caves of Chaos were finally fully explored and all of my other adventures were over, the real world that I returned to was a pretty miserable place for a kid like me. To this day, I still get twitchy when I hear someone bouncing a dodgeball. But the early 80s really did have something going for them to balance out all the Cold War hysteria and members-only jackets. It was the golden age of video arcades. When I couldn't find a way to get a break from Reagan's World and a D&D game, I did it 1 quarter at a time in the arcade. The more immersive the game, the better. I was never a huge fan of Battlezone's gameplay, but it remains the closest I've ever come to actually driving a tank, even if I never made it all the way to the mountains to explore that cool volcano. I always favored the sit-down versions of games like Pole Position and Spy Hunter, because they felt more real to me than their stand-up brothers, providing a cleaner escape from the kids at Pinball Plus who took pitiless joy in pointing out that my shoes were tracks from Kmart, not authentic slip-on Vans. Hey, at least I'm not wearing a members-only jacket, you tools. While game designers and arcade owners did everything they could with cabinet systems and sound design, it was my imagination that did most of the heavy lifting when it came to filling in those games' alternate reality. In fact, I defy anyone who played it to tell me that they didn't want their slush puppy shaken, not stirred, after a particularly rousing round of Spy Hunter, with the Peter Gunn theme blasting behind their heads, your foot jammed down on the gas pedal, machine guns blazing, while the wind blew through your perfectly feathered hair. This is something that my kids have never had to do. Their immersive narrative gaming experiences are the space shuttle to my paper airplane. When my son Nolan was 17, I showed him some of the classic Infocom games that I loved when I was his age. After growing up in a world where our Xbox 360 is more powerful than every console and computer I owned in my childhood combined, he was unimpressed. This is what gaming was like for you? This is what you did for fun? I was a little saddened. As you can imagine, a little piece of me died inside. But I can't blame him for not understanding why the lurking horror scared me as much as Silent Hill or Dead Space. After all, when I was his age, I could only dream of one day putting myself into a living, breathing world like Liberty City or Rapture, where my imagination could focus on bringing the story to life because the world was already there. I love it when he and I visit those places together in a game, and he can take them completely for granted because I remember what it was like before. The earliest console video games didn't just encourage us to use our imaginations when we played them, they forced us to. I mean, when I was 9, I cared as much about the little yellow square that was my guy in Adventure as I cared about AOFL when we played D&D last year. I guess it's a pretty good thing that there weren't any 8-bit acid pits in Adventure, right? Right, Chris Perkins, can you hear me? Pretty good thing it wasn't a multiplayer game, right, Scott Kurtz? I kid because I'm bitter. In my lifetime, don't metagame. In my lifetime, I have had a front row seat as video games have advanced from Pitfall to Portal. And while gameplay and graphics have changed, the fundamental experience of using our imagination to fill in the gaps remains the same. I mean, think about Portal for a second. After the first time you play it, you can get through the game in less than 90 minutes. You never hear another character speak except for GLaDOS and the turrets, and the only other thing you interact with is the weighted companion key. I know, let's have a moment of silence for the But the world that we see is so beautifully realized and so compelling that we know there is something going on outside of aperture science. Because our imagination does what it must, because it can. When you play a game, any game, you are using your imagination to bring a world to life. And that is truly special. Because while all destruction is essentially the same, when you create something, it is different every time. When you create something together, you are building bonds with your fellow gamers that could last your entire lives. The Venn diagram of my best friends, my gaming group, and people from high school who I still want to hang out with is one perfect circle. I suspect that that may be true for many other gamers of my generation. And I know that my kids will be saying the same thing in 20 years about people they've never met face to face, but interact with every day in an online game that will make Call of Duty then look like Pong looks today. Some of those worlds that we jointly create are as complex as the ones you find in an MMO, while others aren't much bigger than a Halo or Modern Warfare map. But they exist because we choose to visit them. We make these worlds real, even if it's only temporary. One of my favorite worlds to create is when I play Rock Band with my friends. We create a world where we are the rock stars that we just can never be. We create a world where we're playing in front of an arena filled with thousands of people who are screaming for us because we're awesome. You know, it's sort of how Jonathan Coulton's going to feel here in about 30 hours. Oh, and a quick memo to those rock band and guitar hero haters who want us to know that we aren't real musicians and we should be learning to play actual instruments instead of fake plastic ones. We know. We get it. We're having too much fun to care. Also, don't be a dick. This is one of the greatest joys of gaming. It lets us imagine that not only can we do incredible things, but we can do them well. I'm never going to be able to play drums like Neil Peart, or guitar like Stevie Ray Vaughan. In Rock Band, I don't have to. I just have to play well enough for the game and my imagination to help fill in the gaps. Incidentally, Rock Band haters, assuming that you want us to play real instruments because you love music, not just because you're being an elitist douchebag, it may interest you to know that both of my sons love classic rock because they were introduced to it while playing Guitar Hero 2. Playing Beatles Rock Band gave my son Ryan context for the Beatles music in a way that just hearing me talk about it never could. So, you know, maybe back off that whole Rock Band's lame thing. And as long as I'm issuing memos, I read a story last month in Wire about an NFL player who, after making an incredibly improbable fourth quarter catch, made an equally improbable run to the end zone to put his team in the lead, but it was almost certain that they were going to lose the game. With time running down, he got to the 1-yard line and ran parallel to the goal line to bleed precious seconds off the clock, just like you do in Madden! Who were standing up screaming about it. This guy is from a generation of professional athletes who are facing off in real life against players they grew up controlling in video games. They are using innovative plays that they discovered and in some cases perfected before ever setting foot on an actual field. These players were inspired by video games, where they could attempt just about anything, because if it doesn't work out, they just reset and try again. We have come a long, long way since 10-yard fight and NHL 93. My Kings are playoff bound. In fact, video games have come so far in the last 5 years, I think that they are on the verge of reaching parity with television and movies as forms of compelling narrative entertainment. Last month, I had my house to myself for about 12 hours while my wife and kids were off spending the day doing whatever it is normal people do. So I had 12 hours in a row where I would have uncontested access to our home theater. This coincided with the emergence of my quarterly urge to rewatch the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy in a back-to-back-to-back. To recover my geek HP and restore my nerd mana like you do. So how I would spend this 12 hours was as foregone a conclusion as if, given an infinite supply of quarters, one could make it to the end of Smash TV. Remember the moment you figured out Smash TV wasn't about playing the game, but about paying the game? I grew up that day. So after kissing my wife goodbye, I moved my supply of nerd chow from the kitchen to the living room. I set it on the coffee table, and I went to the cabinet where I keep all of my DVDs. As I reached for disc 1 of Fellowship of the Ring, I saw a number of other geeky options. Complete second series of Doctor Who. The absolute ultimate, this is the last time I will ever touch this film. I swear to God, I am so serious this time, director's cut of Blade Runner. No, really, guys, I mean it. More Mystery Science Theater 3000. Sitting next to all of them was a small stack of Xbox games with Dragon Age Origins on top. I should point out for context that at this time, I had been playing Dragon Age for about 70 hours. I was, as they say, invested in the story. Now listen, I am not an obsessive gamer. Pause for laughter. Will, don't read that. Andrew. I don't care what level I am. I don't care what equipment I have, how many kills I've racked up, any of the things Blizzard uses to keep you in the Skinner box. However, when I get invested in an ongoing story, whether it's a series of books, a series on television, an epic comics crossover that's just going to be retconned in a year anyway, incidentally, like Spider-Man, how's that brand new day looking out for you? Really? That's what you're doing it for? The retcon of brand new day gets booed, but the Diss of Warcraft doesn't. I can honestly say I thought those things would be different. I grew up a little bit that day. I need Richard Dreyfuss behind me doing voiceovers. Sorry. When I get invested in an ongoing story, I become a very specific type of obsessive. I have to know what happens next. I'm that guy in the D&D group who brings extra Mountain Dew, just in case the other mortals at the table get tired before we find out exactly what is at the center of the Tomb of Horrors. Come on, you guys! We're all here. The DM's right there. It's not like he's gonna kill the whole party, right? Guys? Hello? Listen, I love The Lord of the Rings. I love it. I've been reading it since I was 12. But I know what happens next. Because it is the same every time I watch it. So with 12 uninterrupted, guilt-free hours counting down as I wasted precious seconds, I realized that I wasn't nearly as interested in going back to Middle-earth for the 70th time as I wasn't going back to Ferelden for the 71st hour. I think a big part of this was knowing that when I play that great game, Take the One Ring Back to Mordor, I'm going to get out of the prancing pony level with my party intact. It'll be scary, but it's going to happen. Gandalf the Grey is going to get just enough XP from slaying a Balrog to level up to Gandalf the White, and he's going to get there just in time to complete that boss battle at Helm's Deep, where, no matter how many times I mash the X button, Legolas is going to ride his shield like a fucking snowboard down those steps. I set this on awesome and somebody changed it to appeal to teenage girls. Quit fucking with my defaults, you guys. Sorry about that. None of this makes that journey any less enjoyable, mostly. And it's only a matter of time before I decide to sit down and take it all in again. But when I was faced with a choice between watching how a fantasy epic unfolded with an ending I already knew, and actively affecting how a fantasy epic unfolded when the ending was still shrouded in mystery, that choice wasn't really a choice at all. And as a bonus, I could focus the story exactly where I wanted it to go, in whatever order appealed to me. Can you guys imagine how awesome it would have been, just to pick a random and non-controversial example, if we'd been able to ignore that whole Nikki and Paolo side quest in Lost?
Yes!
That was the worst DLC ever. Now listen, to tell you the next part of this story, I am going to have to use some spoilers. So I'm going to apologize in advance. Also, Darth Vader is his father. It was Earth all along. Kaiser Soze is a sled, and James Cameron can't tell a story to sell his life. Sorry. So I was near the end of my first time through Dragon Age. I was getting ready for the climactic battle with the archdemon. And I suddenly had to make some very difficult and completely unexpected decisions. One of which made a character I cared deeply about leave my party. It wasn't as upsetting as losing my dog in Fable 2. This is a story I will only tell after my third Guinness, because when you break the world down into dog people and cat people, I am a dog person. So a quick memo to the developers of Microsoft Game Studio. Fuck you for not letting me kill Lucy to get vengeance for killing my dog. But I still felt a tangible, emotional loss. It was like, look, I'm sorry I won't put my demon baby inside of you more again, but my character Jared is lawful good, and he just doesn't roll that way. Like, isn't it enough that I killed your mother when she turned into a dragon and then I gave you her grimoire? Like, besides, I have this thing going on with Liliana, and though I certainly got the achievement for nailing you in the party camp about 40 hours ago, and I'm pretty sure we both enjoyed it, when I came back for round 2, you were all, oh, hey, I think we have to break up. So honestly, I think it's a little weird that you're suddenly like, hey, fuck me, so we can make a demon together, or I'm leaving. Spoiler alert. Also, guy who talks to Dragon Age characters like they're real even when he's not playing the game alert. Like I said, I was invested. When Morrigan left me, I did not know. Jared, when Morrigan left Jared, my character, not me. When Morrigan left Jared, I didn't know if we would ever see her or talk to her again with that character. And even though she was always kind of snarky and a little harsh, I liked her. She was certainly easier to get along with than Sten. God, what is with that guy? But when I realized that she was really, truly gone, I felt tremendously, physically sad. It was kind of like the way I felt the first time Gandalf fell off the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Only this time, I wasn't just a spectator. I had a direct hand in the events unfolding the way that they did. I had to make an incredibly difficult choice that was going to have a lousy outcome no matter what it was, and I was responsible for it. Kind of like the decisions we have to make in real life. It was one of those moments that can make a certain kind of gamer put down the controller and take a break to kind of work shit out, you know, try their head. Can make other gamers yank the cord out of the wall and restore from a save file. I am the kind of gamer who had to keep playing to find out what happened next. At that point, Dragon Age was no longer about defeating the archdemon and ending the blight. It was about finding out what happened next in the story. And what I could do about that. Because if I could make Morrigan leave, after all we had been through together, who was next? So I kept on playing. All night. I have a puppy. And he wakes up at 6 a.m., no matter when the rest of the house goes to sleep, so that he can run around in the yard and celebrate getting me out of bed and Are You Fucking Serious o'clock. You know, like dogs do. It's part of his daily routine. So, even knowing that Seamus would wake me up at dawn 30 and demand to be let outside, I still played well past 1 a.m. Not because I wanted to collect kills, not because I wanted to level my character, and not because I wanted to complete a quest or get loot. I intentionally allowed myself just 5 hours of miserable sleep because I hoped against hope that I could somehow find a way to get Morrigan to come back and be my friend again. Now, I understand that there is a new Dragon Age Awakenings in which a mysterious friend may return. I have not had time to download and play this game. I have been working on a speech. When I get home on Monday, I anticipate several sleepless nights in a row, if you get my meaning. Now, I have told you this story because I believe it illustrates something that makes our narrative experience while gaming fundamentally different from our narrative experience while watching a movie. When I finished Jared the Lawful Good Rogue, who dedicated his life to ending the Blight and making Arl Rendinhow pay for murdering his family, I started a different character. He has a different origin, he has a different alignment, and he will ultimately decide that, hey, nailing the sexy Witch of the Wilds one last time isn't such a bad idea after all, because come on, it's just a little demon. What could possibly go wrong? I am not suggesting that narrative video games are going to replace television and movies any more than television and movies replaced books. But the line between them will continue to blur until we can play video games that are visually and narratively comparable to television and movies. To support this bold assertion, I offer 2 words: heavy rain. If that's where this starts, creators who are coming out of film school today know this. And they are not just focusing on breaking into Hollywood. They're looking to break into Redmond, or Edmonton, or Austin, or another one of the growing number of cities that is becoming known as, oh, that place where my favorite game is made. When I was a kid and I knew that I wanted to be an actor, I was inspired by movies. Today, as a storyteller, I continue to find inspiration in those places, and on television when I can navigate the seemingly endless sea of fucking garbage reality programming and actually watch them. I editorialize because I'm better. But I also find inspiration more and more in games. From computer RPGs to pen and paper RPGs, even in some board games that have imaginative settings. And I hope, really hope, that someone in this room who hears this will find inspiration in a game. And that person will get excited and make something. You could be the next Gary Gygax. You could be the next Yamoto. You could even be the next Gabe and Taika. You could make an incredible, positive, enduring difference in a lot of people's lives, all because you played games together. This leads me to the last thing that I want to talk about. Conventions. Conventions are the original social media. Before Facebook, before Twitter, before Second Life, before the internet itself, fans of science fiction, books, movies, and TV gathered together in hotel ballrooms and dusty concrete-floored halls to talk about our shared obsessions. When wargaming became popular, it was the most natural thing in the world for people to gather once or twice, 12 times a year, to play games, to talk about games, and to create games together. When war games begat role-playing games, the tradition continued. At Gen Con and Origins and regional conventions all around the world. And when role-playing games begat computer games, that tradition continued at LAN parties and at E3. And when E3 sucked so hard, E3 sucked so very hard. It begat the possible death of video game conventions. Gabe and Tycho created PAX, and it was good, and here we are. All of the things that make us weird and strange in the real world, those things that people tease us for loving, those things that we seem to care about more than anyone else at work and school, those things make us who we are. And when we are at PAX, we don't have to hide them or explain them or justify them to anyone. We have come here this weekend, and we will go to PAX Prime in Seattle in August, and we will be back here in a year, and back there next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, because just playing games isn't nearly as fun as playing them together, surrounded by thousands of people who love them as much as we do. You guys, the next 72 hours are going to go by faster than you realize. So make sure that you stop and look around a few times every day and appreciate this time. It will be over before you know it. And I think I speak for all of us who love PAX when I say, Boston, you have been given a wonderful gift in the hosting of this con. Please take good care of it. With great power, comes great responsibility. If I may offer 3 small but important things you can do to make PAX awesome, they are these. Please, for the love of the flying spaghetti monster or deity of your choice, take a shower every day. Speaking as someone who left PAX Prime last year with H1N1, wash your hands frequently. But most importantly, if you only take one thing away from the time we have spent together today, please let it be this. Don't be a dick. Now, before I get out of here and start playing Mario Kart, I'm going to steal from the 2007 version of myself one last time. I want you to look around you. We are parents. We are grandparents. We are sons. We are daughters. We are professionals. We are students. We are Trekkies. We are browncoats. We are everywhere. We are geeks. We are nerds. We are liberals. We are conservatives. We are Christians. We are Jews. We are Muslims. We are atheists. We are Nintendo fanboys. We are Xbox fanboys. We are Sony fanboys. We are Atari will never die 8-bits forever fanboys. We are wannabe rock stars. We are wannabe race car drivers. We are wannabe DJs. We are wannabe dragon slayers. We are Alliance. We are Horde. This weekend, all that matters is that we are gamers. We are, all of us, creators of our own stories together. Welcome home.